Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it. Our case title for today is A Deadly Friendship. This is a true crime story, but we're going to tell it slightly different than our normal podcast, format. I want you to sit back, grab your coffee, like we said, your lemonade or your wine, and I want you to try to see if you can figure out who the victim is in this case. And then once you figure out the victim, see if you can identify the murderer. Like they say here in the South, buckle up, buttercup, because here we go. Alphonse and Brittany met in high school during gym class. They were both super competitive and athletic, and they were playing on the opposite side of each other during a game of dodgeball. Brittany had the ball, and Alphonse was attempting to dodge her. This went on for several minutes until finally Brittany slammed Alphonse with the ball. Alphonse was super impressed because how could this tall, red-haired, freckled girl beat him? And that's when Alphonse knew this was going to be his friend. Soon after, Alphonse and Brittany were indeed inseparable. Despite coming from two different worlds, Alphonse and Brittany bonded over their competitive drive, their athleticism, and their dreams for something better in life. Alphonse was from San Jose, California, and he moved to Lodi, California when he was around 8 years old. The reason for the move was primarily because his mom was very sick. She had lupus and diabetes, and they believed that moving to a smaller type city would be better for her and her health. Alphonse found himself often taking care of his mom, who he would often find in a diabetic coma and having to call 911 for help. He adored his mom, and he would often take care of her. Before high school, Alphonse lived a fast and wild life. His house was the spot. You know what I'm talking about. Like, he was the house that everybody wanted to come to because he had a lot of freedom. And so, they knew we can go over to Alphonse's house and have a good time. Now, Alphonse dabbled in selling marijuana, and he even used it a couple of times because he ran with the crowd that was leading him down the wrong path. But once Alphonse got to high school, and shortly after meeting Brittany, Alphonse decided he was going to turn his life around. He knew that he wanted better for himself. And his friendship with Brittany, as his friendship with Brittany blossomed, the distance between those problematic friends that were going down the wrong path, well, they grew apart.
In contrast, Brittany lived a very privileged life prior to high school. She attended a private school. She was determined and outspoken about her goals. She was great in softball and in the classroom. Brittany was also very family oriented. Most people described her as a tomboy, yet despite their different upbringings, Alphonse and Brittany bonded over their similarities. They were inseparable. They were always at each other's houses, even though everyone always wondered if there was something more. They were best friends, though. People who knew Alphonse believed that because he was close with his mom and cared for her, he was more sensitive to girls' needs. And Brittany claimed that she just got along more with guys than girls. Once these two met, they did everything together, and that didn't stop them from dating other people during the time. Now, I have a question for you, MD. Do you believe that girls and guys can truly be platonic friends?
Well, I think that I am probably in the minority. I don't know, maybe not, but I don't. I think that inevitably they can, but I guess when I say I don't think they can. I think that at some point, especially in a high school friendship, um, one person likes the other. Right. So, like, truly platonic means neither person has feelings for one another. And I think in my mind, even if it's never spoken, one person liked the other. What about you?
I think when you're in this kind of elementary setting here, and by elementary I just mean fundamental. You're in high school, you're figuring out relationships. I do think it can be strictly platonic. But That's a question for our listeners. Want you guys to think about that and share your thoughts. But as I stated before, the two of them dated other people, and Alphonse was a flirt. He was a ladies' man, and his friendship with Brittany didn't change that at all. But it was also understood if you see Alphonse, you see Brittany, and vice versa. On the weekends, they would hang out at bonfires and enjoy one another. They would turn up.
Now, Lodi was a small town. It wasn't a lot to do there. And if you are from a small town, then you understand that teenagers in those small towns, I mean, really, truly, let's be honest, anywhere they're going to find something to get into. But specifically in small towns where there really just, there isn't a lot to do. There's not a lot of restaurants, there's not a lot of, extracurricular activities. And for this group, Alphonse and Brittany's group of peers, that thing that they chose to get into was illegal bonfires. So they would have a lookout on the weekends that would just be peeping and making sure, no police or anybody was going to be scoping them out. And they would get their drinks and other illegal drugs, and they would, like Steph said, turn up. Alphonse noticed, during this time as they were engaging in kind of, the bonfire activity, that Brittany was, she started to kind of get a little too into the drinking, and he became, concerned. He had already been down that path in his own life, and he didn't want to see his best friend get caught up in that lifestyle. After all, the two of them both had plans. They were intent on going to college, and they had successful careers that they were thriving to, wanting to get involved in. So he tried to deter Brittany from this world, but if you knew Brittany, you knew that she was strong minded. And when she decided she was going to do something, she was going to do it. And nobody was going to deter her from that. Alphonse would just keep an eye out on her and make sure that even if she was getting into it, that he was close by to protect her and keep her safe. The two of them did make it through high school, and after graduation, Brittany was accepted into a local college and was working at a tanning booth full time. Now, her parents extended their garage into an apartment and allowed her to live there while she attended college. Brittany was focused. She wanted to be an obstetrician, and she knew that that was a long road ahead, but she was determined to achieve it. Alphonse similarly was attending community college and working. His dream was to become a film producer. Him and his mom were really into watching movies together, and he envisioned himself as being a film producer when he grew up. And although the two were no longer together all of the time, they still found time on the weekends to hang out. And on the weekends, it was as if nothing between their friendship had ever changed. That is until one party where Brittany met one of Alphonse's friends from before he knew Brittany. His name was Evan. Evan was Alphonse's first friend when he moved from San Jose to Lodi. And like Brittany, Alphonse and Evan were inseparable. And true to character, Alphonse was a protector of his friends. When Evan would come to his house and have holes in his shoes, or he noticed that Evan was wearing the same shirt over and over and over again, Alphonse would give him a pair of his own shoes and clothes to wear. He looked out for his boy. But as the two grew older, they started to go down that wrong path together. They dabbled in smoking marijuana and even selling it. But Alphonse, as he got older, decided, I'm trying to change. And Evan was like, I'm not. So the two of them grew apart.
When Brittany met Evan at a party her and Alphonse attended, she was smitten. This guy was everything she was looking for. He was handsome, fun. He seemed to be into everything that she was into as well. And you can imagine that Alphonse, the protector, was not feeling this new connection between Brittany and Evan. He tried to make sure that Brittany was aware of the type of dude Evan was. But once Brittany made up her mind, as MD stated before, she was going to stick with what she wanted. You may be thinking, what kind of dude was Evan? I mean, we haven't really tapped into who he was. Evan was one of the largest marijuana drug dealers in Lodi at the time. He also was a player. So Alphonse knew that this wasn't the type of guy that Brittany should go for, but Brittany was determined. Alphonse tried to respect their relationship, but it became increasingly hard when he would learn about how Evan was cheating on her. Again, he tried to tell Brittany, as he would any of his other friends, that this was not the guy for her. But when they are grown, they do grown things. You can't tell grown folks nothing. Another question: what do you think about bad boys, and why do you think girls are attracted to them? And I also think that it can be true for boys too. Like, they're attracted to the girl that is pretty and she may live life on the edges. I think this is a common question for most of society, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think you have boys that are attracted to the quote unquote bad girl, and the good girl is attracted to the quote unquote bad boy. And I don't know, maybe it's something in them that they don't see in themselves, or maybe it is something in them that they see in themselves, but they're scared to tap into. But the attraction in my mind usually is, I feel like it's probably because they see the bad boy, and when they meet him, they see the charming side of them, other people. But when you met them, they were nice to you. And you
Right.
saw the nice part of them, because even the bad boy has a good side to him. What do you think, Steph?
I usually think that when you are attracted to the bad guy, you're usually young, you're green, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And I'm sure there are situations where it ends up good, right? It ends up going good
Right.
because you turn them good. But I think there's just a type of, it's just you're attracted to things you can't have, right? Just like Adam and Eve in the garden. So I think it can be very, very,
Enticing.
enticing for
Yeah.
sure. So this was the situation with Brittany, as Alphonse tried to tell her continuously, and family and friends, Evan's not the best. And of course, as relationships do, they go through the honeymoon phase, but then it gets real. And this is what happened with Evan. He began to show his true colors, which was the cheating. She found out about him cheating on her several times. And she actually found out when she was out with her mom, and she broke up with him. But, you break up to make up, as they say. And they eventually found themselves back in a relationship. And there would be several times where she would go and find herself in the arms of her best friend, Alphonse, but she would eventually run back to Evan. One of these breakups, Brittany actually did run over to Alphonse's place, and she was crying about something Evan did once again. And Alphonse was listening like the patient friend, listening and comforting her. Then out of nowhere, he tries to kiss her. And Brittany jumps up immediately, told Alphonse no. She couldn't believe that he crossed that line with her, because she never saw him as her best friend, and she couldn't believe that he crossed the line with her, and she saw him as a brother. She felt disgusted, and she immediately left the situation, and their relationship hung in the balance.
As Steph said, she was furious. Now, but Alphonse was deeply apologetic. He told her that, he got caught up in the moment, and he promised her, that would never happen again. Now, Brittany did say that she forgave him, and they tried to move on, but things would never be the same, because, you just got that awkward energy, right? Like, it's like, this happened. Now I don't know. Like, do you really like me? I thought we was just friends. And of course, she went back to Evan, as she always did, and things just became increasingly distant between Alphonse and Brittany. Now, it's unclear if Brittany told Evan about how Alphonse came on to her or not, but we do know that shortly after they got back together, whenever Alphonse would text Brittany, she would barely respond. And that wasn't like Brittany. Brittany became distant from Alphonse, and it seemed like if she had to choose between her boyfriend or her best friend, she was going to choose Evan. That was that once bonded, inseparable friendship that she had with Alphonse. Well, that seemed to be over. And so, Steph, I now am going to present a question to you. Would you choose your boyfriend? Now, boyfriend, because I know we're married, it's a little different when you're married. So I want you to put yourself back into the shoes of when you were dating, and not specifically dating your husband. Like, let's go back to like another boyfriend in your past.
Yeah, so, and if you guys are wondering why we're doing the back and forth, because that's what we do on Murder in the Black. We're going to give you a little bit of true crime, and then we're going to give you something to meditate on. But in terms of your question, I definitely think that I would have chose my boyfriend. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be PC here. I probably would have chose my boyfriend in this scenario, right? Trying to picture this scenario. And I think in this scenario, I would have chose my boyfriend because my best friend, can I trust you, bro? Like, I don't know. You crossed that line with me. I thought we was here. Now you trying to kiss me. I'ma just gonna go ahead and go with the loser. I know he's a loser, but he's my loser. You feel what I'm
He's
saying?
my loser. Yeah, no, I do. I really do understand what you're saying. I think that to give you the non PC answer, I really do. And I really believe this about myself back when I was, in the dating world, that I would not have chosen either. I would have tried to navigate, which would have put me in a very horrible position inevitably, right? Like I would have tried to navigate like separating the friendships, and I'm gonna not text, my friend in front of my boyfriend, and I'm gonna not text my boyfriend in front of my friend, and I'm gonna try to navigate this because I don't want to lose this. And I could see myself doing that back in my, early 20s. And because I would not have wanted to lose my best friend. Now you put yourself in this specific situation. I think you're right. Like if I had just came off the heels of my best friend betraying me, or like kind of feeling like they took advantage of me, maybe it would have been different. I don't know. But Alphonse was deeply heartbroken that she chose Evan. He felt like he lost his best friend. He questioned himself and his feelings for Brittany. He was trying to figure out, did I always like her? Was I always into her, or am I just jealous over what she and Evan had? He was just really like looking inward and trying to figure it out. And his answer inevitably was, this is all Evan's fault. And he felt like he had to get revenge on him. He plotted out a way to get even with Evan for taking away all that he felt like he lost, which was Brittany. Now, one day he went over to Evan's house and he broke in, y'all. Like he stole, and this is just crazy to me, Steph, because he stole one shoe of each pair of the shoes that Evan owned. So if Evan owned 20 pairs of shoes, like he just stole one of each pair of that shoe.
Oh, that's get back, and that's petty
It
at
is
its finest.
petty boots, right? And Alphonse, after he did it, he claims, this was just a joke. He ha ha. But Evan and Brittany did not think this was funny at all, which I'm with Evan and Brittany. That is not funny. You are doing the most right now. And in fact, Brittany felt like it was completely disrespectful of her relationship, and she couldn't believe that someone who claimed to be her best friend would do something like this to someone that she's saying she loved. And Evan was equally pissed off about it and would start fights with Brittany whenever Alphonse would text her. And from that moment on, the communication between Brittany and Alphonse ceased.
Brittany was all about Evan at this point. I think that probably even bonded them even more. Evan moved out of his home and into the garage apartment with Brittany. Brittany would attend college and work full time, only to come home and play wife with Evan. She would cook and clean, and Evan would sell drugs. When Brittany's mom smelled marijuana in her house, she told Evan and Brittany that she didn't want that near or at her home. But of course, it didn't stop. Evan continued to sell drugs and smoke, and Brittany continued to stand beside him. Alphonse, on the other hand, started hanging out with his cousin Robert. He continued to go to college and work, but now all of his free time was hanging out with his family. He was deeply affected by the loss of his friendship, but what more could he do to change it? On November 18th, 2009, at 8:30 p.m., a call came into the 911 dispatcher claiming that there was a shooting and they needed to get there as soon as possible because there was a victim dead and one person was injured. Oh. When the police arrived, they found a deceased woman laying in the front of her home with a gunshot wound to her back. The injured victim had been shot in the leg and told officers that he didn't know who did this to them. The victims were Brittany Coberly and Evan Caraway. Evan told officers that he and Brittany were coming back from getting fast food for dinner. As they approached their door, they were ambushed by a guy with a ski mask on, pointing a gun at him. He said he heard Brittany scream and then shots started flying. He stated that he took off running and got hit in the leg. After he heard a couple of more shots, it went quiet. He ran back to check on Brittany, and she was laying on the ground. He picked her up, placed her on the steps, and tried to give her CPR, but she let out a gasp of air, and that was it. He ran to Brittany's parents' house and they called the police. Brittany was rushed to the hospital but was later pronounced dead upon arrival. Police didn't have much to go on, but Evan was confident that it was Alphonse. He kept telling her family and police this information, but the family found it just a little hard to believe because Alphonse adored Brittany. Why would he do this? In fact, Alphonse was at Brittany's parents' house the day before watching old childhood videos. He showed up the day after the murder to offer his condolences. He appeared to be heartbroken, but Evan was insistent. It was Alphonse. Police brought him in for questioning. Of course, Alphonse denied it. Police decided to get a warrant for his cell phone records and data. This, of course, takes time, but when the records finally came in, police find the smoking gun. Not only was Alphonse's phone pinging off the neighborhood tower where Brittany and Evan lived at the time, but he also had numerous text messages that planned out a robbery and ambush for Evan that spanned over the course of months. Police decided to bring in the co-conspirators, a guy named Aaron, Carlos, and Alphonse's cousin, Robert. Aaron and Carlos, of course, give it up. They sing and are offered a plea deal for their testimony. Aaron was a conspirator after the fact and was charged accordingly, but he agreed to testify. Carlos also agreed to testify against Robert and Alphonse and even provided him with witness protection for his testimony.
Now, Aaron and Carlos detailed out that Alphonse wanted to rob Evan for months. He heard that he kept around $60,000 in cash in his apartment, and Alphonse felt entitled to it. We already told you, or Steph told you, that Evan was one of the largest marijuana drug dealers in Lodi at the time. And so it wasn't hard to believe that maybe he had this amount of money just laying around their apartment. So Aaron explains that initially Alphonse spent months just trying to figure out where Evan lived. And once he found out where he lived, he began to surveil the garage apartment to determine the best time to strike. Now, Alphonse was not smart about this at all. Guys, he detailed all of this in text messages to numerous people. And Carlos admitted that he was supposed to be there the night that it happened, but he didn't make it. It was supposed to be him and Robert that was going to ambush Evan while Alphonse would wait in the car. Now, cell phone data corroborated that Carlos wasn't anywhere near the scene of the crime that night, and neither was Aaron. Aaron admitted that he helped after the fact dispose of evidence. At trial, prosecutors explained that it was Robert that ambushed the couple, and that Alphonse and Robert waited in the car for Evan to pull up. And when they did, Robert got out with the gun and ambushed him. They do not believe that either one of them had intentions of killing or shooting anybody, let alone Brittany, and that she was just simply an innocent bystander. Robert claimed that when she screamed, it freaked him out and the gun went off. Now, what's interesting about all these text messages is that police learned that Alphonse was back to selling marijuana like his old days. That life of crime that he claimed he no longer wanted any part of was very much back in his day today. Now, Robert Barnes and Alphonse Fitzhugh were both convicted of first-degree murder and attempted robbery. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Alphonse declares that he is innocent to this day. And in a phone interview, he stated that he was sorry that he wasn't in Brittany's life as much as he should have been. He said he was sorry that she didn't make a different decision on the boyfriend that she chose, and he misses her a lot. Wow. Steph, what do you think about that statement?
Alphonse, I really struggle with individuals, perpetrators, who just okay, you've been sentenced, you got caught. I mean, the evidence was damning. Just tell the truth. Tell the truth. Cleanse your spirit. It's for real. Come on, guy.
I mean, even if he really did believe that he was innocent, I just still think, how dare you go to the extreme of saying she should have chose differently on the boy on who she dated. Really,
because
he
had to get his point across. It should have been me. It should have been me. Oh, okay. It sounded like you were just like Evan at the point where you decided to carry out that robbery plot. You
Right.
were
Like, how
selling
dare
drugs.
how
You
dare you talk about how he was a bad boy, only to then be the bad boy that you're telling her she shouldn't be dating.
2 plus 2 is equaling 5. That's all I got to say.
Well, let's go to closing remarks. And we're gonna Steph and I are gonna start calling it closing remarks because we recognize that there are some times where there just simply is not a takeaway in a case. And this is one of those cases. So I'm gonna give my closing remarks. Now, I thought it was super interesting in one of the documentaries that I watched that Brittany's mom stated that she actually had a takeaway from this whole situation, Steph. And I thought that was super interesting that we usually have takeaways and she actually had one. And her takeaway was go to school and go to work for what you want instead of trying to rob other people. I mean, I think that's a beautiful takeaway from this
That's
situation.
and to me, that is the takeaway.
Absolutely. And I don't have anything to add, but I will say that it is very interesting that the very thing you criticize one person for is the very thing that you partake in yourself. Alphonse had a grudge towards Evan primarily because he had the very thing that he wanted, which was Brittany. And that grudge turned into greed, and then greed turned into murder in this particular case. And even though he didn't intend to kill Brittany, his hatred was the spawn that in fact stole her life. Brittany's family did forgive Alphonse, and I always think whenever I hear that in a case, it's just so beautiful to me. Because despite the fact that they did forgive him, they are devastated by such an incredible loss. Brittany had so much going for herself, and her life was absolutely taken way too soon. I also thought it was beautiful how Alphonse's family was instrumental in comforting Brittany's family after her loss. And her mom stated as much in her interview. Um, she said she loved Alphonse's family. They had become really close over the years, and even after Alphonse was held accountable for his actions, his family, continue to support her,
That's
continue to
beautiful.
support her family. Yeah, that is beautiful, Steph. It is. Um, and that is the case of Alphonse and Brittany. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Did you figure it out? Did you know who the victim was before we stated it? And then did you figure out who the murderer was?
Yeah, that'd be interesting to know. And so we want to go ahead and shout out to Million Podcasts. And if you guys saw me, I posted in our stories on last Friday on Instagram and Facebook. But it's essentially there's a ton of websites that are just devoted to making true crime lists featuring the best podcasts that they consider the best podcasts, right? And we happen to make some of those lists. We actually made more than one. So we made 100 best crime podcasts with 2 female hosts, 100 best 2 sister podcasts, 100 best women in crime podcasts, and 20 best Black true crime podcasts. So shout out to Million Podcasts. We will be featuring them in our show notes. Head on over there if you just want to find out some really good true crime podcasts. And if you just want to find out more about Black true crime podcasts, others that are dedicated to what we do. Shout out to those who are doing a good job. We appreciate y'all. Make sure that you drop a review. I want to remind you guys, I do it intermittently during the season, but I just want to remind you guys to join our paid subscription option. It is $4.99 and you can do a free trial for 3 days. I might extend that for a little bit. But you can do a free trial where you're not charged a thing. And then it is $20 for the entire year. You just want to pay that one-time fee. It's just $20. And we encourage you guys to come on over. We're trying to do some new and exciting things over there. Plus, you get a weekly true crime podcast every week, in addition to what we do on Thursday, which is still free, by the way. I have to stress that. So we encourage you guys just to come on over there, get some more Murder in the Black in your spirit, let it sizzle on your soul. But until next time, this is Murder in the Black.